The letter was crumpled, stained with what looked like coffee, and folded into a lopsided square. It had been shoved into my mailbox between a utility bill and a takeout menu, and I almost threw it away without opening it. But something made me pause. Something about the handwriting on the envelope, messy, almost illegible, but strangely familiar. I unfolded the paper and read the words inside. Dear Miss Chen, I know you probably hate me. I know I'm the worst student you've ever had. I never do my homework. I talk in class. I fall asleep at my desk, but I want you to know that you're the only teacher who ever looked at me like I mattered. I know I don't deserve your time. But I wanted to tell you that you're the reason I keep coming to school. You make me feel like I'm not invisible. I'll never be a good student. But I'll always be grateful for you. Liam. I read the letter 3 times, my heart aching. Liam was 17 years old, with messy hair and a permanent scowl, the kind of kid who wore a chip on his shoulder like armor. He was disruptive, disrespectful, and constantly in trouble. The other teachers had given up on him. They said he was a lost cause, a waste of space. But I had never believed that. I had seen something in him, a spark of intelligence, a flicker of hope that no one else seemed to notice. I didn't know what to do with the letter. I was his teacher. It was inappropriate. It was against every rule I had ever been taught. But I couldn't throw it away. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. The next day at school, I was walking down the hallway when I heard the whispers. A group of students were gathered around Liam, laughing and pointing. When they saw me, they fell silent, their eyes darting away guiltily. I walked over to them, my heart pounding. What's going on? One of the students, a girl named Chloe, held up a piece of paper. It was a copy of Liam's letter. She must have taken it from his bag, copied it, and passed it around. Did you really get a love letter from the class loser? Chloe asked, her voice dripping with mockery. That's so pathetic. Even for you. I felt my face flush with anger. That's none of your business. Give me that. But Chloe just laughed, holding the paper out of reach. I think everyone should see this. It's hilarious. The teacher who thinks she's so perfect, getting a love letter from the worst kid in school. The other students laughed, their eyes cruel and mocking. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not in front of them. Not in front of anyone. Give me the paper, I said again, my voice cold and steady. Chloe rolled her eyes and handed it over, but the damage was done. The whole school knew about the letter. Liam was humiliated. I was humiliated. And everyone was laughing at both of us. I walked away without looking back, the letter clutched in my hand. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. I found Liam later that day, sitting alone in the back of the empty classroom. His head was down, his shoulders slumped. He looked broken. Liam, I said, my voice soft. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. It's not your fault. I shouldn't have written that stupid letter. I should have known it would end like this. It was a beautiful letter, I said. It was honest. And I'm honored that you trusted me enough to write it. He stared at me, disbelief in his eyes. You're not mad? No, I said. I'm not mad. I'm proud of you. It takes courage to be vulnerable. More courage than most people have. He looked down at his hands, a tear slipping down his cheek. Everyone thinks I'm a loser. They think I'm stupid. They think I'll never amount to anything. I don't think that, I said. I never have. You're not a lost cause, Liam. You're just lost. And there's a difference. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, a small, fragile smile on his face. The weeks that followed were a turning point for both of us. I started paying more attention to Liam, making sure he knew that someone believed in him. I stayed after school to help him with his assignments. I recommended books I thought he would like. I listened when he talked about his life, his alcoholic father, his absent mother, the loneliness that had become his constant companion. He started trying. Not just for me, but for himself. His grades began to improve. His behavior became more respectful. He even started smiling more, that small, tentative smile that made my heart ache. The other teachers noticed the change. They asked me what I had done, and I told them the truth, I had believed in him. But it wasn't enough. The damage from the letter had already been done. My reputation was in tatters. The students still mocked me, and some of the other teachers had started treating me differently. They thought I had been inappropriate, that I had encouraged him. I didn't care. I knew the truth. And I was proud of what I had done. It was December when I found out that the school board was planning to let me go. They had received complaints about my unprofessional conduct from parents and teachers. They had decided I wasn't a good fit for the school. I was devastated. Teaching was my life. It was all I had ever wanted to do. And now they were taking it away from me because I had dared to care about a student. Liam found out about the decision before I did. He came storming into my classroom, his face red with anger. "They can't do this to you," he said, his voice shaking. "It's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong." "It's okay, Liam," I said, trying to calm him down. "It's not your fault. I'll figure something out." "Don't tell me it's okay," he said, his voice breaking. "You're the only one who ever believed in me. You're the only one who ever gave me a chance. And now they're taking you away. It's not fair. It's not fair." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "I know," I said. "But I'll always be proud of you. No matter what happens, I'll always be proud of you." We stood there in silence, two people who had found each other in the midst of chaos, bound by a connection that no one else could understand. The day I left the school was one of the most bitter days of my life. I had poured my heart and soul into teaching, believing that I could make a difference, believing that every child deserved a chance. But the school administration didn't see it that way. Budget cuts, they said. Restructuring, they said. They used all the right corporate words to dress up a betrayal, and in the end, I was handed a box and a farewell meeting that lasted all of 12 minutes. My contract wouldn't be renewed. My time was done. I spent my last morning clearing out my desk. I pulled down the faded motivational posters, the timelines of history I had drawn with my own hand, the dusty globe that had seen better decades. I emptied drawers filled with old lesson plans, red pens with dried out ink, and a collection of thank you notes from students who had moved on. It was a quiet, lonely ritual, performed in a room that had once echoed with laughter and argument and the restless energy of teenagers trying to figure out who they were. By the time the final bell rang, the building was almost empty. The halls were eerily silent. I took one last walk through the corridors, running my fingers along the cold metal lockers, peeking into classrooms that were already dark. I paused outside room 204, where I had spent the last 4 years, and I pressed my palm against the glass of the door. I whispered a goodbye to the room that had been my second home. When I returned to my desk to gather my last few belongings, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small cardboard box sat neatly in the center of my otherwise empty desk. It was plain and unassuming, tied with a simple piece of twine. I frowned, wondering who had left it. Most of the staff and students had already gone home. I untied the twine and lifted the lid. Part. Inside was a single letter, written on a crumpled piece of notebook paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, a chaotic, messy scrawl that slanted to the left, letters crashing into one another like cars in a traffic jam. I recognized it immediately. It was Liam's handwriting. I had spent an entire year trying to decipher his essays, trying to convince him that spelling mattered and that punctuation wasn't just a suggestion. I had grown so familiar with his chaotic script that I could have picked it out of 1,000 other students. I unfolded the paper carefully and began to read. Dear Ms. Chen. I don't know how to start this. I'm not good with words, and you know that. But I have to try. I know I can't change what happened. I know I can't make the school keep you. It's not fair, and everyone knows it. You were the only teacher who actually cared. You were the only one who looked at me and didn't see a troublemaker. You saw me. I want you to know that you changed my life. I used to think I was worthless. I used to think that nobody would ever believe in me. My dad left. My mom works 3 jobs. My brothers are in trouble half the time. I was angry all the time, and I didn't know why. I took it out on everyone, especially you. I remember the day I threw my textbook across the room because I couldn't figure out the homework. I expected you to yell at me, to send me to the principal, to give up on me like everyone else did. But you didn't. You just picked up the book, dusted it off, and handed it back to me. You said, Liam, you can do this. I know you can. Just take a breath and try again. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Nobody had ever believed that I could do anything. You made me believe I was worth something. You made me want to be better. Not for the school, not for my mom, not for anyone else. For myself. Because you made me feel like I deserved to try. I'll never forget you. And I'll never stop trying. I promise. Liam. I read the letter once. Then I read it again. And again. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable. I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling the weight of his words. All the exhaustion, the frustration, the heartbreak of losing my job, it all melted away. In that moment, none of it mattered. Liam had found his voice. He had found his purpose. And I had been a part of that. That was all that mattered. 3 years later. I didn't expect to see Liam again after I left the school. I assumed he would graduate, move on, and live his life. I had no illusions of being a permanent fixture in his story. Teachers are like gardeners, we plant seeds, water them, and hope they grow. Sometimes we never see the flowers bloom. And I was content with that. I was content with the role I had played in his journey, however small it might have been. But fate had other plans. It was a rainy evening in autumn, 3 years later, when I walked into a small, cozy bookstore tucked away on a side street in the city. I had just moved into a new apartment, a tiny studio with bare white walls and empty shelves that cried out for books. I had always believed that a home wasn't a home without books, so I decided to hunt for some second-hand treasures to fill the gaps. The bookstore was called the Sheltering Page, and from the outside, it looked like something out of a storybook. The windows were warm with golden light, and stacks of books were visible through the glass. A wooden sign creaked gently in the wind above the door. I pushed open the heavy oak door, and a little brass bell chimed overhead. The smell of old paper and coffee enveloped me like a hug. The store was a labyrinth of tall wooden shelves, crooked and overflowing with books of every size and color. There were worn armchairs tucked into corners, and the soft sound of jazz played from an old record player in the back. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines of novels, letting the quiet peace of the place wash over me. It was the kind of bookstore that felt like a sanctuary. And then I saw the figure behind the counter. He was taller now, broader in the shoulders. His face had lost the last traces of boyish softness, replaced by the sharper angles of young adulthood. But his eyes, those familiar, searching eyes, were unmistakable. He was wearing a neat blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a tie, and a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked professional, put together, and utterly transformed. It was Liam. He looked up from the book he was reading, and when his eyes met mine, his face broke into a smile so wide and genuine that it lit up the entire room. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice warm and full of wonder. "I was hoping I'd see you someday." "Liam," I said, my heart swelling with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "You look different," he offered, laughing softly. He stepped out from behind the counter. "I know. I got my life together. I graduated. I went to college. And now I own this bookstore." I stared at him, stunned. "You own this bookstore?" He nodded, his smile proud but humble. "I did it. Just like you said I could." I felt tears prick at my eyes again. "I always knew you could, Liam. I always believed in you." He walked around the counter and pulled me into a hug. It was a hug that said everything words couldn't express. He had been a lost kid, angry and misunderstood, lashing out at a world that had hurt him. And now he was a man, building a life for himself, standing on his own 2 feet. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear. "For never giving up on me." "Thank you," I said, my voice catching, "for letting me help you." Part 15. He nodded, his smile proud but humble. "I did it. Just like you said I could." I felt tears prick at my eyes again. "I always knew you could, Liam. I always believed in you." He walked around the counter and pulled me into a hug. It was a hug that said everything words couldn't express. He had been a lost kid, angry and misunderstood, lashing out at a world that had hurt him. And now he was a man, building a life for himself, standing on his own 2 feet. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear. "For never giving up on me." "Thank you," I said, my voice catching, "for letting me help you." Hours of conversation. We sat in the back of the bookstore at a small wooden table cluttered with teacups and stacks of poetry. He made us both coffee, and we talked for hours as the rain pattered against the windows and the evening turned to night. He told me everything. How he had been on the verge of dropping out after I left. How he had almost given up when things got hard. But he said he kept thinking about my words, kept hearing my voice in his head telling him he could do it. He had found a mentor, a college professor who reminded him of me. He had discovered a love for literature and history that he never knew he had. He had worked 2 jobs to pay for community college, and then he had earned a scholarship to a 4-year university. He told me about his mother, who had finally been able to cut back on her workload because he was helping support the family. He told me about his younger brother, who had just started high school and was already getting into trouble, but Liam was determined to be the role model he never had. "This store," he said, looking around with pride, "it was a dream I didn't even know I had until I found it. It was falling apart when I bought it. Nobody wanted to take a chance on it. But I fixed it up, shelf by shelf, book by book. It's not much, but it's mine. It's beautiful," I said honestly. "It's everything a bookstore should be." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I learned that from you, too. You always said that learning isn't about grades or tests. It's about finding what makes you come alive. This store makes me come alive." I told him about my new life, my new apartment, my new job as a librarian at a community center, how I was still teaching in my own way. I told him about the children I worked with now, some of them just as lost as he had been, and how I tried to give them the same patience and belief that I had given him. It's like you're still doing what you were born to do, he said. I nodded. I think I finally figured that out. It doesn't matter where I teach or what title I have. What matters is showing up and believing in people. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. His voice was serious, his eyes intense. Miss Chen, he said, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I meant every word I wrote in that letter. You changed my life. And I'll never be able to repay you for that. You don't have to, I said softly. Just living the life you were meant to live is enough. He smiled, and in that smile, I saw the boy he had been, the boy who had written that letter, the boy who had thrown a textbook across the room, the boy who had taken a chance on someone he barely knew. And I saw the man he had become, strong, kind, and determined. The meaning of it all. We said our goodbyes late that night. He walked me to the door, promising to keep in touch. I promised to visit the bookstore every time I was in the neighborhood. We both knew it wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. As I walked home through the rain, I felt lighter than I had in years. The loss of my teaching job had felt like the end of the world at the time. I had grieved for months, wondering if I had wasted my life, wondering if any of it had mattered. But now I understood. My purpose wasn't tied to a single school or a single classroom. My purpose was in the impact I made on people's lives. And one of those lives, one beautiful, messy, complicated life, had been transformed because I had refused to give up. I thought about all the students I had taught over the years. Some had succeeded, some had struggled. Some had sent thank you notes, most had moved on without a second thought. But Liam had stayed. He had carried my words with him, and he had used them to build a future. That was enough. That was more than enough. I found my purpose in that small, rainy bookstore. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would keep finding it again and again, as long as I kept believing in the people I was meant to help. Epilogue. A year later, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a first edition of my favorite novel, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. A small card was tucked inside. Miss Chen, I told you I'd never stop trying. I'm still trying. And I will be, for the rest of my life. Because of you. Liam. I smiled, framed the card, and placed it on my shelf beside the letter he had written me years ago. Together, they reminded me of the most important lesson I had ever learned. That one person, one moment, one act of kindness can change everything. And that was all that mattered.